Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another Sheffield DM. Running pretty much just on time. A couple of technical difficulties today, but we are pretty much there. Thank you again for joining us for another Lunch and Learn session. Sadly, it is the last one we're going to be running for a while as we look to the future and the opportunity to hold in-person events once again, with lots of exciting things on the horizon. In fact, we have a booking already for the 23rd of September here in Sheffield, where we'll be holding our first hybrid event, hopefully, where we'll be able to do a combination of an in-person Sheffield DM combined with the live streaming that you've all come to learn and love. So more on that to follow over the coming weeks. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, because like I say, it is one of the final Lunch and Learns we'll be doing for now, and it's going to be an absolute corker. So for those of you who aren't used to Sheffield DM and are maybe joining us for the first time, every 2 weeks on a Thursday, we've been hosting talks from a series of amazing marketers across the whole spectrum of digital marketing. And these from people from the UK and various different and companies and agencies. We've had guests from Spain, from the US join us as well. It's been a brilliant variety of people that have joined. If you don't know me, I'm your host, Giorgio Casella, and I am the head of marketing at Evoluted, who are the proud sponsor and organisers of Sheffield DM. And this week, we are joined by Bethan Vincent. Now, Bethan is formerly the marketing director at NetSells, a software and product development agency based up in York, UK. Now, Bethan is now, very recently, a freelance private marketing consultant who specialises in helping tech companies differentiate themselves and grow. And I'm really looking forward to this, because in her talk today, Bethan's going to be discussing what it takes to be a great communicator, be that being able to tell compelling stories, deliver amazing A+ meetings with clients, or confidently delivering pitches to win new business. So without further ado, hello, Bethan. Just make sure you're unmuted there.
There's always one, isn't there? There's always one.
8 of these we've run online and it's been perfect, but no, today we've got absolutely fine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, it's my pleasure. And yes, apologies for the background. I've just moved house, and yeah, I didn't want to put up the kind of fake Zoom background. I wanted to give you the realness of my disorganized life.
Raw and unfiltered, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm in the fabulous Evoluted office today, so I've got this lovely blind behind me that would have been washing me out before I closed it.
Fabulous. Cool. So I'll get straight into things. We're going to be talking about delivering presentations and pitches confidently. And let me just bring up my screen. Just check. Is that all coming across okay?
There we go. Perfect.
Brill. And I should be able to go into full screen mode. Is that still good?
Absolutely, that's all great. So for everybody watching, if you do have any questions for Bethan, feel free, as usual, to chuck them into the live chat on YouTube, and we'll go through afterwards. There will be time for Q&A. And yeah, over to you, Bethan.
Awesome. So, like I said, this is all about how to confidently deliver presentations and pitches. And what I'll be doing is blending online and offline as well, because we're entering into a little bit of a weird phase now where I think meetings and client meetings and stuff, that they're happening both online and in person with different people in different rooms and different spaces. So I will kind of cover how to manage that and some of the complexities around that as well. But really, I think this is true. Nobody actually likes speaking in front of a group of people. Maybe there's 1% of the population who kind of love it and were born to do it, but I think the majority of us kind of find it quite uncomfortable at the end of the day. I know I do. I may come across pretty confident, but to be perfectly honest, that's just the result of a lot of practice and having to do it. And my parents made me go to drama school for 8 years on a Saturday morning, so that did help. But really, nobody likes speaking in front of a group of people. It's nerve-wracking. You worry about saying the wrong thing. You worry about doing the wrong thing or making weird hand gestures. That's my thing. I seem to love to do. But this presentation is for you, and to kind of go through some of the learnings and lessons from my past X number of years of doing public speaking, doing pitches, doing presentations to clients. But the great thing is that anyone, and I truly believe this, anyone can learn to be a confident public speaker. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you will be able, with enough practice, to get up in front of people and deliver a compelling presentation, pitch, conference talk, whatever you want to do. Stand up in the front of the pub quiz and run it. You know, this can be applied to multiple different scenarios. And kind of in my numerous years of doing public speaking, doing presentations and pitches, but also being someone who is the recipient of a lot of talks, going to conferences, things like that, I've noticed that great presentations and great presenters do three things really, really well. So they have really good content that captivates the audience, it's interesting, it adds value. The structure of the talk is usually, easy to follow, that it's not winding about here, there and everywhere. There's a very clear thing you're going to get out of it at the end of it. It's not going off on a tangent. And then delivery. It's delivered in a way that's engaging, that's interesting, that the audience can connect with. But the real kind of I don't know if this is an industry secret. I feel like it's an industry secret. The secret is delivery matters more than anything else. And I firmly believe that you can have quite boring, quite dry content that maybe isn't structured in the best way. It's a bit winding, the narrative's a bit confusing. But if you deliver that in a way that is really engaging and really kind of interesting, and it comes from a place of being authentic, that's going to captivate the audience. And really, delivery is the key at the end of the day. I'm not saying you should ignore the other two parts, and we will cover those, but this is what we're going to focus on. This is what I want your takeaway to be from this talk, that if you nail delivery, everything else will follow. So Giorgio gave me an amazing introduction, but I thought I'd just spend a second on why I am the person to speak about this and why you should maybe listen to me. So I've been doing public speaking for a number of years. I've spoken on the Barbican Centre main stage to 1,500 people. I've spoken over in Silicon Valley. So I've kind of put in the work and made a lot of mistakes along the way. The first talk I gave was at a Women in Tech York event, which is a really small meetup in York, and it was to about 10 people in a room above a pub. And that's just to show you, you can start out doing these really small scale events, and they're extremely valuable as well, and they give you a lot of learnings, but you can take that to wherever you want to take that. If you want to take that and be delivering, amazing client pitches to some of the best brands in the country, that is somewhere you can go with it. If you want to just keep it smaller scale and just be doing local meetups and groups you're really interested in, that's great. Or if you want to go down the whole becoming a public speaker as a kind of thing, you can do that as well. It's all completely possible for anyone to do, and I guess I am proof of that in my own way. I've gone from being terrified to being someone who I would consider pretty confident, and hopefully it's coming across here pretty compelling in front of an audience. So we're going to start off in this talk with a few thoughts on content. Like I said, it's not the be all and end all, but it is important to get it right at the end of the day. So the first thing I would say is whether you're delivering a conference talk, whether you're doing a pitch to a client, whether you're just in a meeting where you really want to nail that meeting and it's in front of a bunch of people you want to impress, this is the central tenet of marketing, isn't it, really? Know your audience. So there are different kind of styles of speaking that will appeal to different types of audience. If you're going up in front of the board of a FTSE 250 company, they will respond to a particular style. It's probably a bit more formal. It's probably a little bit more kind of planned out, less kind of ad hoc, off the cuff, with a very clear presentation and all of that stuff. Whereas if you're doing kind of, let's say, an industry conference you're speaking at, where it's a lot more kind of more colloquial, your style of delivery will be very different because it'll be tailored to that audience. It might be more jokes than not necessarily would chime with that FTSE 250 kind of corporate board audience, but will go down well in your industry. So before you plan out a meeting, before you plan out a presentation or a conference talk, really have a think about, what style of content will my audience be interested in? Will they want to digest this as kind of funny jokes, or will they want something that's a lot more focused on data and the numbers? And also think about, what really is everyone getting out of this situation? You as a speaker, me speaking at this event, to be perfectly candid, it's about raising my personal brand. That's what I'm doing here for me, but it's not really about me. It's about you in the audience and what you need to get out of this. And what I'm hopefully doing is giving you some interesting and useful information that you can take away and go and utilize in your work, in your kind of career. but I have to have thought about what you want out of this to be able to do this well. So do spend some time getting to know your audience. If you are in a situation, let's say it's a new client, you don't know much about them, maybe see if you can kind of go on LinkedIn, find out a little bit about the people, maybe some of the work they've done, what they might be interested in, go on their website, see what kind of content they're putting out there, and whether you can kind of align to that. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to kind of make it personal. There's nothing worse than sitting there in a talk which is boring and the person obviously isn't that interested in what they're saying because it doesn't really connect with them. And we've all been there. We've all been in those conference talks, right, where you're just like clock watching, when is this going to end? If you can relate back what you're saying to your own personal experience, how have you lived it? How have you breathed it? If it's in a client pitch meeting and you're talking about the results you've got for other clients, bring it down to like what you did on that account. How did you kind of make an impact? What was really the kind of end result of that? And link it back to kind of your experience of working there, because this is a bit of a cliche, but people buy from people. And if you make it personal, if you make it about you, if you make it about your audience, you're going to get that really great connection. And don't be afraid of kind of throwing in, personal stories about, how have you experienced this? How does this kind of relate to you? Like my whole thing about, I've been doing public speaking for a long time. I found it really difficult at the beginning to get into. And this is something I really care about because I think a lot of people are put off doing public speaking or kind of taking the lead in a meeting when they needn't be. They have something kind of really great to add from their own perspective. It's just about getting people to that point where they feel comfortable doing it. So make it personal. And this is an interesting point, and maybe you won't agree with this, and that's absolutely fine. But I think when it comes to content, nothing you're saying has to be kind of profound or like the most original idea ever or, absolutely groundbreaking. Nothing in this presentation isn't stuff that it's all nicked from other places. Marketeers are the best stealers. But, like I've brought it all together in my own way and packaged it up in a way that hopefully is interesting and useful and saved you some time going around and finding these things for yourself. So nothing you're saying has to be profound, but it does need to be interesting. It does need to capture attention, and it does need to be useful to the audience. And this is where this whole it's the intersection of you've thought about the audience, it's something that's personal to you, and it's also interesting and adding value. That's the kind of Venn diagram we're aiming for here. So a few thoughts on structure. So there are multiple different articles. If you kind of go and Google how to structure a meeting, how to structure a pitch, how to structure a conference talk, there are loads of different articles out there that will cover different ways of doing this. So I'm not going to go into this is how you should structure a presentation, this is how you should structure a meeting. These are more kind of like general tenets that I like to follow that seem to help things flow and have a good structure that people can ultimately understand. Because that's the thing about structure, you're helping people kind of place the information within a framework. You're making it easier for the audience to kind of understand what's going on, connect with it, and get something out of it. That is all that structure is doing in meetings, presentations, and pitches, right? So first off, have a narrative. This is always a bit meta because I'm talking about this talk, but this talk has kind of quite a clear narrative in that I'm saying there are 3 things that are really important when delivering great presentations, but the most important one is delivery. But I'm going to run through the other 2 as well and give you some tips on those. That's the narrative of the talk. So make sure you do have a narrative. You can structure it, like a story. You can structure it with kind of 3 main points you want to go into and then a bit of a conclusion. But it is always useful to have a kind of introduction and a conclusion. And that's the thing, as someone who has sat in a lot of Zoom meetings, haven't we all? A lot of Zoom meetings over the past year. One of the things I've noticed that hasn't happened at the end of Zoom meetings that used to happen in in-person meetings is that kind of wrap up and that okay, so what are the next actions? Who's going to do what do we do from here? Often because people are kind of racing to leave and get to the next back-to-back Zoom call they're on. So either you need to have a clear kind of agenda that structures that kind of end conclusion section in and have clear time for it, or allow time in between meetings to have that kind of close off area as well. And actually, sometimes those conversations are really useful because someone will have kind of sat there, taken in all the information throughout the pitch, the meeting, the presentation, and they'll need a bit of time to digest it. And then they'll go, oh, that's really interesting. That's a great point. Like, you know, maybe next time we can focus on that. And if you don't build in that time, it's just not going to happen. And it's a real shame. You're going to miss out on some really good stuff there. So have a narrative, make sure you make space for the important parts of the presentation, the pitch to happen, especially that conclusion bit. Secondly, you know, I think people are simple. Humans are very simple. We don't have much attention span anymore, if we ever really did have that great an attention span. And really, if you can kind of conceptualize and deliver one key takeaway in a presentation or a pitch, that's going to stand you in really good stead. You know, that's going to be an actionable thing that people can take away and they will remember. And what I see a lot of people do, especially in conference talks, is they try and cram in all of their knowledge, and they're kind of like, oh, and this point, oh, and this point, and you should be thinking about this and this and this, and they'll kind of go here, there, and everywhere, because they're trying to add a lot of value to the audience, which is amazing, but it's information overload. And people, especially when, I mean, you're sat here now with me just talking to you through a screen, it's kind of difficult to do that for 20 minutes and not zone out. I mean, I imagine a couple of people probably have zoned out a bit by now. If you have zoned out, I want to pull you back in to listen to the talk. But if you have one very clear takeaway that people can, you know, connect to, it's very obvious, make it really super obvious, like ram it down people's throats. That's going to add a lot of value and just make the experience worth something to the audience. And then I've touched on this already, but having a clear structure and laying it out for people. I do think it sometimes does feel slightly forced, but it is really good at the beginning of a presentation, a pitch, a meeting to say like, hey, like introduction section, and this is what the structure is going to be. We're going to talk about these 3 points. We're going to do them in this order, and this is the kind of outcome we're aiming for. And as Giorgio did at the beginning, we're going to have a section for questions at the end, because that's often a thing people are kind of, as they're going through, they're thinking, oh, do I interrupt them? Do I put my hand up now and have a question? Do I wait for a little bit? So if you make it super, super obvious to people what the kind of rules of engagement are, what the structure is going to be, it just makes it easier for everyone. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to convey information in the most digestible, succinct possible way. So when it comes to delivery, so I've kind of started off with the 2 sections I said weren't that important and come on to delivery at the end. But delivery, yes, the most important thing. And it's important over Zoom, it's important virtually as well. So first things first, everyone's really nervous before they go into a meeting. Everyone's really nervous before they go and deliver a talk. I still, like even today, I was like panicking a little bit. I had to have a drink of water, had loads of technical issues as well, which didn't help. So try and find a bit of a ritual to get yourself into the zone, because it is a different mindset when you are the presenter and all eyes are on you, and you do need to kind of prepare yourself. So I normally make myself a cup of tea. If it's a conference talk, I might just sit in the kind of speaker's room, be a bit quiet, get myself into the headspace, and then I'll get into it and I'm prepared for it then. And my mind knows what's going to be expected from me. And also don't ever kind of think that doing this, being a facilitator, being a speaker isn't hard work, because it really is. It's actually quite emotionally exhausting. It's quite physically exhausting. If you've been speaking, you know, for 20 minutes solid, I need a drink of water already, and at the end of this, I'm going to need a pint. You know, you do need to build in that space to kind of say, prepare yourself, but also at the end, especially if you're doing something quite big where you've got a lot of adrenaline in you, you're going to have that kind of come down at the end. So build yourself some time to kind of go away, maybe reflect, maybe just be a bit quiet, maybe not be around people, especially if you've been around a lot of people, but have your kind of ritual and a bit of a process behind it. Secondly, this is the thing, there's a really thin line between confidence and arrogance, in my opinion. And everyone knows when it goes into the arrogant territory. Everyone knows that person who is extremely arrogant in meetings and whatever, and dominates the conversation, and it's extremely obvious that everyone else is a little bit uncomfortable by it. I don't want to put you off from being confident, if that makes sense. You know, confidence really is key, but don't feel like you need to be an a-hole. Basically, don't feel you need to portray a persona that isn't you. If you are not like a hyper confident, hyper energetic, like, you know, type A personality person, that's absolutely fine. There's a type of confidence that will suit you that's maybe a bit more calm, a little bit more sedate. Confidence is really about being comfortable with yourself. You don't need to be someone else to be confident. You don't need to be, I don't want to name names, like Gary V type, you know, in your face to be a confident person. That's his blend of confidence. That may not be yours. But just know there is that line there between confidence and arrogance. And then PPB, this is my little acronym, and it's pace, projection, and breath. So one thing I am really guilty of, and most speakers are guilty of, is speaking too fast. You're just like, I've got so much pack in, and like, I've got to like speak really fast. I'm doing it now. But, you know, actually going at a slightly slower pace than you're comfortable with is the pace that's comfortable for the audience. And that's a bit weird to get used to, and it really is practice that will kind of help you find that pace. And I do urge you to kind of, even like just for a meeting, like try and practice in front of a couple of other people, get their feedback on whether you're talking too fast or too slow. Some people occasionally do fall into that. Projection, this is more, I guess, for in-person stuff, but projection, especially when you're in a big room, say a boardroom or whatever, you do need to make sure everyone can hear you. And that's about just having good posture, sitting upright, and kind of speaking from your diaphragm. And again, if you practice in front of other people, they'll be able to give you a sense of like, are you loud enough, essentially. And then breath. Don't forget to breathe. I do this a lot, and I have lots of run-on sentences. And at the end, I'm like, just take your time. Take your time. Pauses are fine. Rhetorical pauses are great. You know, you don't need to be kind of 100 miles an hour with this at all. Eye contact, really important. I'm not going to labour this point because everyone knows it's important, but even over Zoom, it's really important. I know it's hard, but do try and like know what it looks like for you to be looking at the camera so that you can do it, if that makes sense. That is a difficult one though, I will admit, in this virtual world we live in. And then practice, but not too much. You don't want to sound overly rehearsed, in my opinion. I generally do things to the point where I'm like, I could probably comfortably do this, and like I might not follow the script exactly, but it's fine. Like I vaguely know where I'm going, type thing. And the great thing about public speaking is nobody has seen your script. Nobody knows what you were going to say. So if you don't say something, if you miss something out, or you know, you say something slightly wrong in your opinion, nobody knows. Only you know. Like the audience don't know. They probably don't care either. Like they're there to see you at the end of the day. And then yeah, like this is the thing. You've got to be yourself always. Like that's the main thing. There's no point putting yourself in a situation that you feel really uncomfortable in because you're not being yourself. You're not being authentic. And there are multiple different styles of public speaking or running a meeting, and every one of them is equally as valid. As long as you're connecting with the audience, you're providing something of value, there's a clear structure, be yourself. That's the best thing you can be. That's the best piece of advice. It's also the simplest, and it's also the hardest at the same time. I've just got an eye on the time. I do have a quick bonus pandemic material section that I will run through, and this is just some thoughts from the past like year of Zoom meetings that I've noticed from being in presentations, giving presentations. So hybrid remote and on-site meetings where you've got people on a screen, people in a room, they can't be accidents. They have to be by design, because if you kind of say like, oh, we'll just jump on a call and yeah, we'll include some people here, we'll also include people on Zoom, generally that's quite a bad experience for both sides, because no one's like thought about where's the camera going to be, like where's the speaker going to be, can everyone see everyone, can everyone interact, you know, will everyone be able to have a spot to kind of make their point, you know, how's that going to work with if someone speaks up on the screen but someone's interrupting them in person. So think about it before you do it, don't just jump into it. Always set an agenda. I think I've covered this, but it's super important, especially when people's time is really valuable and we're jumping from Zoom call to Zoom call. I'm a big fan of setting things kind of, if you normally do an hour meeting, book in 50 minutes. If you normally do half an hour, do 25 minutes, and that just gives you that buffer, which everyone needs to go to the toilet, grab a cup of coffee. leave in the uncomfortable pauses. This is a great tip, actually. Like, my partner is a training advisor and does a lot of training in the public sector. And he says one of the things he's noticed is that people don't leave in the pauses on Zoom to let other people respond. And because it feels really uncomfortable, this silence. Like, I've got to be honest, like, it feels uncomfortable to me doing this presentation to basically a screen where I don't know kind of how you're like taking this in. I can't see all of your expressions, but you've got to leave in those uncomfortable pauses, because that allows engagement, that allows people to come back to you. And then I learned this the hard way today: prepare plan B in advance. Technology will fail you. You know, make sure you have a backup laptop. If you're on Zoom, can you throw them a Hangouts link if things go wrong, because it will go wrong. And if you've got plan B, you'll feel less stressed. And then final quick one, turn off notifications. There's nothing worse than listening to someone on Zoom when you've got that Slack ping going off every 2 seconds and it's really triggering you. You're like, oh my God, someone needs to get hold of me. Oh wait, it's not my computer. But turn off the notifications. And yeah, I will jump in with questions. I love talking about this type of stuff. I'm happy to answer any questions if you don't want to answer them now online. I'm on Twitter. That's probably the best place to find me. And like introduction said, I am doing marketing consultancy now for technology companies, which is my real specialism and my passion. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I will jump out now.
Wow, thanks so much for that, Bethan. That was a treasure trove of tips and information there. So yeah, where to begin?
Sorry, I'm like a massive, like, I will add in loads of information and I have to like pull myself back sometimes. So
no, it's absolutely brilliant, and an absolute ton of great points I completely agree with, and loads that have resonated with me, especially, you know, kind of coming in and doing Sheffield DM over the last few months. One big thing actually that one of your final points, I'm probably starting at the wrong end, I'm starting at the back end rather than at the front, but that eye contact over Zoom is such an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I know I'm doing it right now. I'm looking at you on my screen instead of looking at my camera. And it's so difficult to get into the practice of. But it segues really nicely into the question we've had from Jen, which is about how you go about building rapport on a video call when someone's got their camera off. I mean, it's difficult enough me looking at your face now. When you're looking at that little black square with someone's initial in there, it's so much harder.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of like a weird answer, but I do try and imagine I'm in a room full of people when I give these talks, and like kind of put myself in the space of like beyond my computer here, there's my wall, and like in my mind, there's an audience there. And I'm trying to, I think if you've got that in your head, you're speaking to people, not a screen. That really helps. The building a rapport, I think it's harder on a large scale, you know, where you're at a conference, let's say, and like there might be 100 people with their screen off. That's why I always make the point to say, like, come and connect with me on Twitter if you've got a question, like find me on LinkedIn. Like there's kind of that's your call to action to almost like come and like be a human with me. Let's do human things and talk.
Definitely adds that small personal touch, doesn't it? Instead of the faceless video. It's the difference between just sitting and watching a YouTube recording than engaging with somebody live, isn't it?
Yeah. And that will come back though with time. We will get that again. But I think that this has shown us that it is possible to do this. You know, it is possible to have that connection with people over the internet.
Totally. One of the big things that I wanted to pull up and ask a question on was you gave some really interesting points on preparing to deliver talks and the anxiety that you still get even after you've done it for a long time. Now, I'm still very new to this, and I remember when I first started doing Sheffield DM, I was shaking. I probably shouldn't put this on a recording, but, you know, shaking, really nervous, drinking. I was like, oh God, no, what we're going to do? And I'm by no means amazing at it at this point, but it becomes so much easier after getting some practice, diving into it and doing it a few times. So I guess my question revolves around, for people that you're encouraging to practice and have a go at doing these things, do you have any advice on great ways they can go about doing that isn't just talking to their mirror or talking to a blank screen?
I mean, get a person, like get your partner, get your friend, get your family, and get them to sit through your talk. And actually, sometimes that's really great to have, if they're not from your industry or your specialism, that perspective, because they might like pick up on something like, oh, I've never really considered that before. Yeah, maybe I do need to explain what that is. So yeah, do that. I mean, it is like a muscle. You've kind of got to build it up. It will, it will never fully kind of go away, but the more you do it, the better you'll get. And I think meetings are a really good way of practicing, because it is really scary, especially if it's in front of like your colleagues who you want to impress. To get up there and say like, hey, this is my idea, we should do this. But that is building up that muscle on like a slightly smaller scale.
Totally, yeah. Practice makes perfect, as they say. So yeah, grab anyone. I mean, if anybody's out there that wants to go, I'm more than happy to do something like this behind the scenes, not broadcast, with you. So there's that offer. God knows I need to practice as well. On the flip side of that, looking at the other end of coming out of doing a talk, you made some really great points on, that come down, and you get the adrenaline, you've got kind of maybe a bit of a dry throat or something afterwards, and the energy is just like, wow, especially if you've done like 20, 30 minutes. How do you approach taking that recovery time? Because I don't know, for me, I do end up with just like that almost like exhaustion after you've been full on and focused on what you're doing. What's your process for recovery?
Yeah, so what I'll go and do now is I'm probably going to go down, because I'm working from home, I might go and lie on my bed and not speak to anyone for half an hour, and that sounds absolutely perfect to me. I think, if you're in an office, try and block out like focus time in your calendar where it's just you like on your laptop kind of getting some work done, but it's not interacting with other people. And make sure you have a little treat for yourself at the end. Like, you've done a really hard thing. Go and get yourself like some ice cream, go and like in the sunshine and enjoy the natural world for like 10, 15 minutes. Like this is work. It's hard work as well.
That's great. I may go and treat myself to some ice cream after this now on your recommendation.
I know. I just said that and I was like, oh my God, I really want ice cream. And
You've done it now. Yeah.
Ice cream.
But yeah, I think those little rituals are so important. And even when it's not particularly doing talks or delivering big pitches or presentations, even if it's just a 30-minute meeting, take the 5-minute gap in between, try not to book back-to-backs, have the time for a cup of tea to reflect and just put some white noise or some rain or something on in the background, whatever floats your boat. But yeah.
100%.
There's been no other questions that have come through, unfortunately, which I'm going to take as you've done a brilliant job, and everybody's going to take some incredible stuff away from this. I tell a lie, one has literally just pinged through. I just speak too soon. A question from Kate. When presenting to a range of audiences at the same time, so colleagues, clients, stakeholders, all in the same room, how do you make sure to meet everybody's needs and not bore a specific group of the audience? Yeah, great question.
Yeah, so be very inclusive in your language. If you're using jargon, explain that jargon. Like the first time I was in a meeting and someone was talking about CAC and LTV and like all of that stuff, and I was like, I have no idea what this means. It's just going over my head, and that's not a great feeling for someone to be in the audience to be thinking that. So do try and explain stuff. I think the not being boring thing, that can be difficult because there are sometimes pieces of information you need to convey that, especially I'm more talking about like client meetings that are very specific to a stakeholder or the client. Maybe just try and keep that as short and succinct as possible so you can move on to the general interest stuff quicker.
That's a great answer. You're absolutely right that you can never always cater to everybody in the room at the same time. So yeah, get the bit you need to out of the way and then try and be inclusive to get something in for everybody else too.
Yeah, 100%.
Brilliant. I'm going to give it a second because as soon as I say that there's no other questions, somebody else is definitely going to ask one. So what I will say is, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure there's some really great takeaways that people are going to take from this. I know that I think you're the first speaker we've had that's had some special bonus material at the end. So that's a win for you to take with you today. And yeah, for everybody who's watching, obviously, as usual, this will be fully recorded and shared on YouTube afterwards for you to go back and refer to share with colleagues that maybe need a little boost to help them get over some stage anxiety and deliver some great presentations. It's all going to be shared around via Twitter and email, LinkedIn, etc. afterwards as well. And I will make sure to share Bethan's details once more after the talk. So if you do want to get in touch with her about any of her services or to talk about her presentation today, you can definitely do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me and for listening as well.
Thank you. No, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. just to close things off, because I've given you your time, there hasn't been any questions come through, so that's that. This is the last Sheffield DM for the time being. It's going to be really sad to be taking a break for a little while, but we will be back, rest assured. In-person event, 23rd of September is the date so far, provided that everything goes to plan with how our government approached the easing of lockdown and how we approach the situation as a whole. We'll tell whether we get to do that or not, but I am very confident and I've got my fingers crossed that I will see you all soon. I mentioned last time as well, myself and the rest of the Sheffield DM and Evoluted team are going to be at Brighton SEO in July. So if you find yourself down there, do get in touch beforehand. It would be great to buy you a beer, have an ice cream on the seafront, anything like that, to catch up about which talks you're finding interesting. So there's an option if you so would like to do that. And then last of all, yeah, if you've enjoyed today's talk, if you've enjoyed Sheffield DM, if you've enjoyed this kind of lunch and learn approach that we've been taking rather than the 2 monthly evening at a pub type thing, let us know by going down, hitting that thumbs up on the video below, leaving a comment, talking to us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and tell us what you love about Sheffield DM. Tell us what you'd like to see us doing in the future. Tell us the type of topics you'd like to see, the speakers you want us to get, maybe a different variety of events. The world is your oyster, but do let us know. And that's, yeah, like I say, Twitter @SheffieldDM, LinkedIn similar, or you can email us on hello@sheffielddm.co.uk. There we go. The end of a short-lived era. Thanks, Bethan. I will let you go and do your decompress now. I'm going to go do the same, and I will see all of you in September. Thank you very much.